Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Marvel Team Up, issue number 4, dated September 1972. And it is Spider Man and the X Men. Um, Let me talk about the cover first. Cover is really a terrific cover here. We see Spider Man being taken down by um, four members of the X Men. Cyclops, in kind of a dick move, hits Spider Man in the back. And yeah, Iceman's just hitting him in the ass too. So yeah, these guys aren't playing fair, but they're winning. They're also in their street clothing in this episode. Not episode, issue, but it does relate to an episode because this was inspired. The idea of like rebooting the X-Men was inspired by a then popular TV show at the time. I'll talk about that. I am on gummies, so yeah, sometimes this will explain my train of thought. A lot of word balloons. So I don't have to talk about the cover too much. I guess I could talk about the properties. Excuse me, meaning the Marvel properties. You have Spider-Man here, who is at the top of the Marvel food chain. I think Marvel wanted Fantastic Four to be their flagship title, but it eventually ended up being Spider-Man. And the X-Men. The X-Men were at a low point in this era. It's very strange. Given the history, more people are associating the X-Men with comic books, probably more than any other comic entity, except maybe Spider-Man. But at one time, yeah, the X-Men were kind of treading water at one point, and they were pretty dormant at this point. I guess I can talk a little bit about why that was the case. That was simply because after the Neil Adams run, and the reason why Neil Adams requested the title was that he wanted Marvel's lowest selling book to kind of then impress the higher ups on how much his art and his contribution alone can increase sales. And Adams turned out to be right because sales of the X-Men did pick up. However, the increase in sales wasn't enough for the publisher, Martin Goodman, who owned the company at the time. Stan Lee was the publisher in chief. It wasn't enough for him to want to spend new money getting new stories. So he said, F it, we'll just reprint the old stuff. They were low-selling titles back then. Most of the kids who are now interested in the X-Men probably never read those stories. So we'll sell that. And it did work, and it went into reprint, the X-Men proper issues, for a few years before it was rebooted in the mid-'70s. But think about this. If this attempted reboot of the X-Men worked, how would that have changed comic book history? Because there's probably no creation of the, quote, new X-Men in 1975. So this failed experiment had a big impact on popular culture. So I'll go into the story, and is called The Mark of the Mutants. So we look at the splash page. We see the creative team. The writer is Jerry Conway. I always liked his work. He was the writer for Spider-Man that I grew up with. The penciler is Gil Kane. So the guy who drew the cover also drew the interiors. Gil Kane is a great artist. He did a great job here. I also have to throw some praise to the inker, Steve Mitchell. I'm not familiar with him. I don't think he lasted in comics too long. Nevertheless, he did a really good job. He kept very true to Gil Kane's intent. And sometimes the problem, while many people love Gil Kane's his poses and the way he creates his characters, there are people who dislike the way he drew because he was very minimalist. There were very few lines, and things sort of looked like they came from a sketchbook more than completed art. But nevertheless, those criticisms aren't here. Steve Mitchell did a good job. Gil Kane sometimes needed an inker who would provide some grit to his work. So anyway, we see the Peter Parker is having a terrible dream. He's recalling a fight that he had with Morbius in the previous issue. Around this time, the mid-70s, Morbius and Spider-Man were just fighting each other every other week. It was really weird. So anyway, Peter at this time, he's rooming in with college student classmate of his, Harry Osborn, who's the son of the Green Goblin. Harry doesn't know that, but Peter does, so it creates for an interesting dynamic. However, the two are friends. They are roommates. Peter is, he's calling out in a cold sweat. He doesn't know what's going on. He looks really ill. He has all these chills. Harry's clearly noticing Peter is very ill. However, Peter plays it off like, no, don't worry about it. Don't be a mother hen to me. I'm glad you checked on me, bro, but, really, keep your distance. So Peter Parker feels bad about that, but he feels he also has a good reason, because this is very unusual for Spider-Man to be sick. So he's sort of in denial. Peter's in denial about how ill he is. He decides that he's going to web sling, and he kind of needs to get away from Harry. Peter looks really paranoid in this drawing here. He has a Spider-Man costume on a wire hanger. Well, I'm not quite sure how Joan Crawford would take that.
No wire hangers ever!
But nevertheless, he puts on his costume, puts on his web slingers, and he kind of wants to deal with his illness by just simply exercising and getting about. And sometimes he finds that helps. I do agree with that. That helps me sometimes. So he's kind of web slinging. He's also talking about the events that happened in the previous issues. He's not talking to himself. He's thinking out loud. So Spider-Man is thinking out loud, and he's letting the reader know what's going on. Before I get back to the comic, I'm going to take a look at this ad. This is a funny-ass ad. This is a Charles Atlas ad. There weren't very many quote-unquote muscle men back then, because fitness wasn't a big thing until the 70s. And Charles Atlas was one of the first, kind of 30s, 40s guys who was somewhat muscular by those, standards. This cartoon is a classic one. It's the kicking of sand in the face. I think it kind of teaches some of the wrong lessons, though. So anyway, it's about, the skinny guy. He gets kind of humiliated in front of his girlfriend. And this bigger guy doesn't care. He totally demasculates this really skinny guy. And he's reduced to sort of acting like a 14-year-old. He kind of looks a little like Alfalfa. And his girlfriend is like, oh, little boy, not a big deal. So she's demasculating him. So he gets home, he kicks the furniture, which is kind of good, don't kick the dog. And he feels that if he bulked up, that he would be able to handle guys like that bully. It says later, how long later, we know it's not that easy to bulk up. So this guy's kind of like Jack now. And they emphasize that it didn't take long for this to happen. I guess in those days you could kind of stretch the truth a little like that. Then it turns out that the now muscular guy pops. he pops the bully right in the jaw. So the bully didn't hit skinny guy. Or former skinny guy. But former skinny guy, he's letting out all his anger on him. Now, the weird thing is that, working out and building up your muscles, it doesn't give you the ability to fight. And he threw a pretty good right here. So even when he was skinny, he knew how to fight. And my thinking is he knew how to handle that other bully. because bullies are kind of lazy, and what you want to do with them is that you want to show that you're not worth the trouble, like you're going to be trouble for this person, and if you stand up to them even a little bit and you give them a little resistance, they'll go away just to get to an easier target, even if you're not going to win. I mean, if the bully hits you 5 times, try to hit them 4 back. So anyway, it turns out this guy had fighting skills. That's my point. So he didn't really need to be muscular. He just needed to be a pain in the ass to this bully. So anyway, going back to the story, we see this guy. He's kind of a professor, and he's familiar with the work of Michael Morbius, and that's kind of the living vampire here, as he was called in the Marvel Universe. He was a scientist who had a blood disorder that was going to kill him, but he found a treatment to cure him of that disorder. But the thing is, it turned him into a vampire. So he has like white skin, he has hollow bones, which means that he can fly. He's very strong. I don't think he likes the daytime. I think that's the one thing he shares with traditional vampires. So and like a vampire, he needs to drink blood. However, when he flies into the room of this professor, who's looking at his notes and saying, "Oh, science! This guy may have made a mistake here." And it turns out that the professor's onto something. However, Morbius is stopping him. And here's a nice drawing by Gil Kane of him giving kind of that backhanded punch to this old guy while lifting up a chair, like he was going to hit the guy with it. So, this is very good artwork. Lots of well-drawn imagery, and also the terrific poses. So anyway, the Morbius feels bad about what he did because he didn't want to punch this guy. He knew this guy, he was friends with the guy, but Morbius, his reality has changed quite a bit, and he's talking again. He's talking to. I guess the villains can talk to themselves. The heroes are the ones who think out loud. So Morbius is talking to himself about how, hey, I can fly because I have hollow bones. And but he's also claiming Morbius also wants this professor to help him cure him of being a vampire. So anyway, we go to the next page. Turns out the professor has a landlord. She's underneath. She's hearing this commotion because there's a lot of racket going on. So she's going up the stairs to check on her tenant. However, Spider-Man arrives, and that's the particular apartment Spider-Man wants to get to, because Spider-Man's also aware of this professor because he's studying at the university, and he's aware of somewhat of Morbius's work. They encountered each other in an adverse way in issue, I think 101, something like that. Those are 2 really good issues. Those are also by Gil Kane. So anyway, Spider-Man's in the apartment. The landlord opens up. She throws a fit. She's like, "Eek, a mouse." Anyway, this old lady, she faints, but nevertheless, Spider-Man is like, if the police suspect anything bad happened there, they're going to say, hey, Spider-Man did it. So anyway, that's enough for this to be reported in the papers in terms of a crime. The the Bugle was like, Spider-Man guilty. And he said, Spider-Man kidnaps this noted scientist. We're not going to phrase this in a way that, if we happen to have to walk it back, we don't care. Gil Kane kind of inserted himself here, having a little bit of fun. He's having a lot of fun. He's doing a lot of interesting things, a lot of new things here. So anyway, one of the people who is reading the Daily Bugle is Professor X. And Professor X is friends with this professor. So he's like, hold it, my friend's in trouble. We need to get the X-Men involved in this. So Charles Xavier mentally calls out his students because that's his mutant power, his mutant brain. And we see two members of the X-Men in the Danger Room. This is Angel and Iceman. They're back in their generic uniforms that they wore for like I think the first 38 issues of the X-Men, and then they switched over to more specialized or individual costumes. Some of them were good, some of them were awful. The Angels, it took Neil Adams to fix the Angels one, but nevertheless, they're doing this because the kids who were buying comic books off the newsstand back then, they were seeing the old reprints. So they would see an X-Men comic, but it was a reprint. So, and since they were going back mostly to that, they kind of did away with the new costumes. Marvel was a little on and off about that. I think it was up to the editorial team to pick, and no one cared. I'm not going to talk about Marvel Bullpen Bulletins because I did this in The Beast. So if you listen to my Amazing Adventures 14 cast, you'll hear my thoughts on that. Going back to the story, Angel, Iceman, they're in the Danger Room. They get Professor X's warning. Marvel Girl is kind of reading a book. They're all in costume here. And, she kind of says, oh, yeah, I'll be right there, like a good girl. Cyclops he's out having a nature walk. He has a little rose in his hand. Kind of makes me think of the producers, that movie.
Giving pretty flowers to the people that we meet.
So, Cyclops also gets the call from Professor Xavier, and he says he'll be right there. Professor Xavier attempts to contact Hank McCoy, the Beast. However, the Beast is going through his own issues in his own comic. The reason why the Beast isn't with the rest of the X-Men was that he, quote, graduated from the school. So Professor X felt that he had learned enough and that he can go out on his own. And he's sort of doing that. He says, listen, I'm sorry, I really want to help you, but I can't. Professor X is like, I'm not going to pry, but I sense there's something really bothering you. And again, Hank McCoy blows him off. He's saying that whatever problems I have, I'm going to fix. So nevertheless, the four other members of the X-Men in their street clothes, they come to Professor X's meeting, and they're in the laboratory. And the four members are fashionably dressed. People in the mid-70s, early 70s would have dressed like this. What they're wearing is fine. Even by today's standards. Maybe Bobby's a little dated. Same with the other members of the X-Men. They go out in their street clothes. And this is the experimentation that Marvel wanted to do. They were trying to think of things to reboot the X-Men. And one of the ideas was to have the X-Men fight in civilian clothes. And this was based on the idea of a TV show that was popular at the time called the Mod Squad. And the Mod Squad were, quote, these hip teenagers, but who were working for the police. And they were, upholding the establishment, but they weren't dressed in uniform. They were dressed in their street clothes. So you basically had teenagers behaving as seasoned veteran police officers. And it was kind of like, wish fulfillment, the TV show. Some of the episodes were pretty good. It had a great introduction. So anyway, they were trying to base the X-Men on that. So if you think about it, if that's succeeded, there's probably no, quote, new X-Men from the 1970s. So anyway, Charles sends them out. This is one drawing, I think, right here. The perspective where you have to turn, where things are upside down. I think this works better in theory than in practice. We go back, we see Spider-Man. He's web slinging some beautiful poses from Gil Kane. He really knew how to draw like figures who look like they were in the Olympics, because there's a lot of Olympic-like poses from the main characters here. First of all, Angel captures Spider-Man. Angel's somehow strong enough to break off Spider-Man's webbing and to hold him up, too. However, Spider-Man is not really impressed with Angel, calls him Buttercup here. I remember laughing at that. Spider-Man's just gonna, it just take me a second to whip this out.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
The spider web, however, Bobby's able to stop the stream of webbing with his ice powers, and Spider-Man figures out that he's fighting the X-Men. He's not quite sure why. The Angel steps in. Angel is really arrogant. He really doesn't understand that outside of being in the air, he's not much different than a normal person. And Spider-Man teaches him a lesson and gives him this great backflip. And it kind of calls him a minor leaguer too. And Angel's in big trouble here because he can't properly flap his wings. However, Marvel Girl, Jean Grey, she's there. She uses her telekinesis to slow down Angel's descent. Angel kind of makes a slight little romantic gesture. Hey, I'll give you a little kiss for doing this for me. And of course, Cyclops is there here and it's saying, yeah, you better not try it.
Oh, a wise guy, huh?
It's established that these two are together. Almost from the beginning of the X-Men, there was always this coyness that, Cyclops like Marvel Girl like Cyclops, and they're always very coy about it. Sort of none of them bared their feelings to each other. They would just sort of play this game of tag and kind of like eye contact and no eye contact, blah, blah, blah. And finally it took Neil Adams, and Neil Adams was like, fuck it. They're adults. These two are together, and they're fucking, and that's that. And that's how Neil Adams drew them. So that kind of held. So these two are boyfriend, girlfriend. It's established. Spider-Man, he's not thinking about any of that. He's dealing with Iceman. And Spider-Man does a really great job well, actually, I should say Gil Kane does a really great job of drawing Spider-Man smashing into Iceman's movable sleigh. Iceman is kind of thrown for a loop. Iceman admits, hey, I can't stop this guy. He's saying, Cyclops, you need to do it. Cyclops flips his glasses and he uses his power blast from his optic beams. However, it seems like wherever Cyclops is aiming his beams, Spider-Man just moves right out of that area, just in a split moment. And Jean Grey is impressed with Spider-Man, saying it's like he can almost sense where these blasts are coming. Spider-Man hears it. He likes that compliment. So even in a fight like this, he has kind of his eye on the ladies. I think the reason Stan Lee came up with the spider sense, and that's what I understand, and I do believe that Stan Lee is the creator of Spider-Man, was that he had trouble killing insects, and he thought that it couldn't possibly be his ineptness, but it had to be they had some secret sense that was warning him of Stan Lee and his fly swatter. So anyway, I think that's why they came out. And as far as Stan Lee in creating Spider-Man, I think he was the creator of Spider-Man. He had a vision for Spider-Man that no one else shared. And Stan Lee fought for that vision. And that vision was the one that we saw in this comic book, in these comic books. He was the one who wanted to make him into a teen. He was the one who wanted to make him into a loser. He was a sort of loser. He was the one who wanted him to have, all these kind of troubles that he had when he was that age. And even though there other people designed the outfits and came up with the aesthetics, it was or in many cases probably wrote the scripts, but nevertheless, Stan Lee was like, this is the Spider-Man I want, and this is the Spider-Man that we grew up with since 1962 or 63. Anyway, off that soapcase, Spider-Man and Iceman, they're having it out. Spider-Man is starting to get ill again. So he knows he needs to end this fight fast because he's about to black out. However, Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, she holds Spider-Man in a shield. So she's using her telekinesis to hold Spider-Man still. Jean Grey's making it clear like Spider-Man is really strong. And I might not be able to hold this guy very long. Cyclops is not too concerned. He noticed that Spider-Man's getting sicker and sicker, and he finally passes out in front of them. Same way, Professor X, he finally shows up. He's about to make mental contact with them, but Angel interrupts it, saying, hey, we know what you're going to ask for. So they take Spider-Man back to the lab, to the X-Men's lab. Professor X is running all these tests, and he's also going to probe Spider-Man's unconscious mind. And there's some really nicely drawn art here by Gil Kane. And turns out that the last couple of issues of The Amazing Spider-Man are being replayed. This is when Spider-Man was fighting the Lizard and Morbius. That was a great storyline. And he's learning the origin of what was going on with Michael Morbius, because Spider-Man knows the background of what happened, and it retells another battle that they had. So yeah, Spider-Man's been busy with this guy. Professor X realizes that the problem isn't with Spider-Man, it's with Michael Morbius, and that they had almost made a really bad mistake, which is something that they rarely own up to. But they said, yeah, we made a bad mistake. However, some good things are going to happen if we can do this. So they're looking. They know Professor X knows that they need to find Michael Morbius. He's going to use his mind scans. This is going to tax Professor X's ability, but he'll try to figure out, based on thought patterns, where Morbius and the Professor is. The Professor is still out. He's unconscious. Looks like one of these guys that's just with his eyes open. I knew someone like that. It was weird. But anyway, Michael Morbius is kind of pissed off. He's saying, how can this guy be so frail that, just one single punch knocked him out for hours? And he's tempted to actually feast on Doctor because, he's a vampire. So Morbius needs blood. He leaves the Professor, who kind of looks like the guy from that Thomas Dolby video. Science! He leaves, and Morbius is going to hunt for the night. And yeah, he refers to the humans that he attacks as, prey. Same way, he sees two muggers. So I guess the comic was like, Gary Conway was going, listen, if we have to sacrifice someone, let's make it someone we want to as a society to sacrifice. So the two mugger friends, Morbius grabs one from behind, and it looks like he sucked the blood out of him. The other mugger sees this when he notices something wrong, and he's like, holy crap. But nevertheless, the second mugger is not someone who's easily scared. So he looks to attack Morbius. And he makes mention to the mugger, makes mention to the Night Stalker. Night Stalker, I believe, was a popular TV show that aired on NBC. It aired for one season, but it has like a real strong cult following. I forgot who the star of it was. I think Gavin McLeod or something like that. He was a good actor. He had a very good voice. So they're making reference to the Night Stalker, and that dealt with like horror and the supernatural. So anyway, Morbius is not impressed with this guy at all. This guy is, he's kind of looks a little like Charles Manson, if Manson had a hair, a shave. Nevertheless, Morbius attacks him, and he also sucks his blood. So Morbius is fed on two individuals whose society is like, you made things better by leaving it. But the angel sees this, and the angel is like horrified, because as this is going on, and the angel flies off. Again, he's in his civilian clothing. He just has his pants on and some shoes. He looks like he's going to a slumber party. He catches up with the other members of the X-Men. They're in a convertible, driving around town. Again, they're in civilian clothing. So Marvel was thinking that this was an idea that they could reboot the new X-Men, have new stories, but have them revolve around them being in their civilian clothing. The idea didn't take off. They did solicit letters saying, hey, if you liked it, let us know. This way they can kind of gauge the interest. I don't know what their decision was on not to do it. Nevertheless, the team flies off to the point where Angel tells them to go. All four of them encounter Morbius. It looks like, the last Morbius, he's dead. Morbius is still hungry. He's more animal than human at this point. He was kind of an ugly guy to begin with, and being a vampire has made him uglier. So, kind of gives him that weird, almost Skeletor appearance. Before I go back to the story, I want to talk about the letters page. Excuse me. Okay, it's a mix between of the second issue and the first issue. The first letter is talking about the second issue, saying basically that it started strongly, but then it really fell off. So he liked the first couple of pages. He liked the setup. But then he felt the issue kind of went in the wrong direction. I felt it had too much in it, because you had like 3 members of the Frightful Four, and then you had a Nihilist, and I felt that it was that issue of Marvel Team Up was kind of like, there's too much going on for like a one shot deal. Talking about the art was by Ross Andrew and Jim Mooney. Jim Mooney was a good pickup for Marvel. I remember he was a longtime Superman artist. He was let go at DC because they felt that he was too old-fashioned and he was making too much money, and they just wanted to downsize him. They felt his style, Jim Mooney's style, was too old-fashioned for comic books at the time. Jim Mooney eventually went to Marvel, and he actually did change his style, and he developed more kind of a Sal Buscema style. And I remember seeing a lot of his art in Marvel Team, and I thought it was fine. And I thought he was a really good Spider-Man artist in my eyes. So anyway, that's a lot. Anyway, the second letter, we're at the second letter, saying that he's this person kind of wants things to be mixed up. Because the first 3 team-ups, it was Spider-Man and the Human Torch. And they were always trying to offshoot the Human Torch as kind of a solo character based on his, quote, popularity with the Fantastic Four. But it kind of turned out that the Human Torch character wasn't that popular.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
And so they couldn't do for the Human Torch what they did for the Thing, because there were people who didn't like the Fantastic Four but who liked the Thing, and they would buy Marvel 2-in-1. And the Thing had a long solo adventure comic. I think Marvel 2-in-1 lasted 60, 70 issues. And they could never do that with the Human Torch. So this person's saying, move things up, bring back the Lady Liberators. Oh yeah, that was in the Avengers. That was a nice story. Sal Buscema did great art on that. He draws beautiful women. Same way, okay, so they're not really answering their questions back. They're kind of templating answers here, the Marvel guys. Okay, someone's talking about the first issue, saying it's really good, and saying it worked as a human interest story, and yeah, like that. That was a pretty good issue. That was a nice issue. And they wrapped it up in 2 because the Sandman got away and they had to fix that. Another one talking about Marvel Team Up #1. Yeah, he kind of likes it. He thought it was a good story. It humanized one of the villains. Anyway, he's kind of also talking about some Avengers 100, Thor 200 coming out. And this last letter kind of doesn't deal with Marvel 2-in-1 directly. Any issue saying, well, you guys have been releasing a lot of comics at the time, and this is one of the best ones. And that's true, because this comic lasted 150 issues. And it lasted longer than, I think maybe the Defenders were around a little bit longer. Yeah. So, same way, back to the story. The X-Men, they were confronting Morbius. Morbius takes the lead and he attacks them. And he knocks them over like bowling balls. At least the male members, because they don't want to show him hitting a female. So anyway, Iceman's the first one to recover. Morbius sees him, gives him this vicious kick. Thank God that his head is has this ice shield to it. So, but nevertheless, the fact that it does have this ice shield to it, and he's still knocked out, gives you an idea how hard he got kicked. Cyclops uses his eye beams, but turns out Morbius is too fast for him. And notice that he's even faster than Spider-Man, Cyclops, as he gets hit square in the face with a garbage can. I love that. This is such great artwork. And then the Angel's coming. The Angel, who's the least powerful of the bunch, by the way. He goes in. He says, "I'll take care of Morbius." And Morbius again. Angel's been insulted 3 times. And Morbius says that, listen, if I'm going to win, it's not going to be from someone like you, minor leaguer. So, yeah. So, Gary Conway doesn't like the Angel too much. It was really funny that early on, the Angel was able to defeat Iron Man 10 years earlier. And now, everyone's laughing at the Angel here. So it turns out there's one more X-Men who hasn't been knocked unconscious. It's Jean. Jean is using her telekinesis. She's using her ability to fling objects at her fling objects at him from a distance. And yeah, this is smart. Jean Grey was usually the most competent of the X-Men. It was very strange how she was written. On one hand, they made it clear she's a girl. And there was always sort of a second-class citizenship with her, because she couldn't be seen as, more heroic than the guys most of the time. But at the same time, she was always kind of the only one who didn't do dumb things. She always did smart things. So anyway, Morbius has Jean cornered. Scott's awake. He sees this, and he wants to use his optic beams full blast on Morbius. But he can't because Jean's right there. So he does kind of give him a mid-level shot. Morbius skips over it, but he grabs Jean, and he has her by the neck, which is kind of scary when you think about it. And we see some foretelling here with the debris in the back. So anyway, there's kind of a showdown between Scott Summers and Morbius, or Cyclops and Morbius. Jean is right in the middle of it, and he could probably break her neck easily with his strength and his speed. So, but at the same time, Scott's like, I can't let you go. And he says, listen, I know you like this girl. She's pretty. I think she's pretty, but don't bluff me. You don't want to lose her. However, the fortune is in Cyclops' alley. As it turns out, there's a mirror behind Morbius, and Cyclops is able to ricochet a shot off that mirror, and it hits Morbius exactly. Because apparently, not only Cyclops, he has the optic blast, but the optic blast kind of trained his brain in geometry. So Cyclops, he has a way of figuring out the geometry of an area naturally, and he knows how to fire his beams in a way that he can generate the ricochets he needs. So he has that kind of special talent, and Jean is very appreciative because only Morbius was affected. They're kind of hugging. He's being a good boyfriend to her. So anyway, they have Morbius knocked out, but they have a problem. They need to question him to find out where the professor is, because they need the professor to help Spider-Man, who's sick in Professor X's lab, in case anyone's forgotten that. So Professor X, he's telling everyone to be quiet, and then he's using Jean as a conduit into Morbius's brain. So there's sort of like, there's definitely a mind link between the three of them. They're able to extract the memories that they need. And then the Angel flies off with Morbius. That's kind of dangerous, actually, because Morbius can wake up at any time. So yeah, no, the Angel's showing some heart here. The others, they drive off back to Professor X's mansion. Then we see Spider-Man waking up. He doesn't know what's going on, but he knows he feels better. He wakes up. He's in Morbius's lab, and he sees Morbius knocked unconscious. The other members of the X-Men, along with the Professor Science. They're there. They're kind of explaining to Spider-Man what was going on, kind of filling him in. And Spider-Man understands what's going on because he's a scientific genius, so to speak. So Spider-Man can talk definitely intelligently on the blood and toxins and so forth. Professor goes on, but they're saying, listen. Spider-Man's like to the professor, hey, it looks like I owe you my life. And he said, but no, the guys give credit to Jean. They're saying, yeah, you know what, if it weren't for Jean, who brought me back, I wouldn't be here, to help you out. So anyway, the guys are being really nice. They're giving the chick some accord, and she deserves it. She was important member. Spidey kind of pulls a dick move here by force kissing, Jean Grey, and then telling her what a great thing it was. This is not really thanking her. And by the way, Jean is sporting a huge rack. She is definitely a D girl up there. So Spider-Man, he's kind of kissing her. Jean looks great with like her hair, her red hair, like long. That was a really popular style with women until like the late 70s. It started dying out. So anyway, Spider-Man, he leaves. He damages some property as he goes. Yeah, kind of a dick move. Professor X, dirty old man who once was in love with Jean. They realized the era of that panel. But Professor X looks on approvingly. He's like okay with his students being sexually assaulted. So yeah, this guy campus rapes. What are those? So Spider-Man he jumps out. Jean thinks Jean is gaslit into thinking this is romantic. It isn't. The other members of the X-Men watch Spider-Man. Who is way more powerful than them, except for maybe Cyclops, swing off, and Professor X is contemplating. as he's looking at the unconscious Michael Morbius. So he's unconscious there. I guess the Marvel wants to figure out what they want to do with them. It says like the next issue is The Eye of the Bastille. I think the next issue had the Vision in it, but I don't think that was it. I think probably might have been an error. I don't know. Doesn't matter. So anyway, this is my look at Marvel Team Up number 4. It was a fun issue, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.